He was dragged out of first class like a criminal. His only offense was the color of his skin. No warning, no apology. Just 3 flight attendants, a fabricated system alert, and a white woman who claimed that seat doesn't belong to people like him. The phones recorded, passengers whispered, and the man, silent, composed, refused to move until they forced him. What no one knew, not the crew, not the passengers, not even the airline's CEO watching the chaos unfold in real time, was that the man they humiliated wasn't just another black traveler. He was the one person who held their entire future in his hands. This isn't just another story about discrimination. This is the one they never saw coming. If you believe in justice, if you've ever felt silenced or overlooked, you need to see how this ends. Hit like, subscribe, and tell us, what moment shocked you most? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We want to hear your voice. Lucian Graves stepped into the Skynova Airlines private terminal at JFK, the weight of quiet opulence pressing in from every direction. Polished marble gleamed beneath his Italian leather soles, and curated art installations framed the walls like trophies meant only for a certain kind of traveler. This was where billionaires, diplomats, and moguls gathered before takeoff, where luxury wasn't offered, it was assumed. Lucian moved through it all with the calm certainty of someone who belonged, though the glances said otherwise. He wore a charcoal wool coat over a tailored navy turtleneck, subtle but rich in cut and fabric, his posture straight, stride deliberate. But still, eyes followed. The stares weren't overt, just a half second too long. One woman, clutching a Hermes tote, whispered something to her husband when he passed. The man turned, looked Lucian up and down, and didn't smile. Lucian ignored them. He didn't dress to be accepted. He dressed because he could. At the lounge's self-service espresso bar, a young barista with perfect teeth intercepted his hand mid-reach. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, offering a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This area is reserved for Sapphire-tier clients only." Lucian paused, pulled out his boarding pass, and held it out without a word. Her smile faltered when she saw the unmistakable Sapphire Class 1A designation. "Oh, right. Sorry. We've just had a few mix-ups lately." She motioned toward the drinks, but her voice had already cracked. Lucian nodded once, picked up his cup, and walked away, his face unreadable. In the lounge, leather chairs arranged like chess pieces invited deep comfort, but Lucian chose a corner seat by the window. From there, he watched planes taxi and staff move below with the mechanical grace of a well-oiled empire. He checked his watch, boarding in 20 minutes, and glanced back toward the other guests. Most were white, middle-aged, clad in familiar uniforms of wealth, power suits, diamond cuffs, silk scarves. A few people stared openly, some curiously, others with barely veiled doubt. Lucian met no one's gaze, but he felt them all. He was used to it. When boarding was announced, Lucian approached the priority lane marked Sapphire only. The gate agent scanned his pass, hesitated a breath too long, then recovered. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Graves," she said with a smile that tried too hard. He nodded, stepped through, and entered the jet bridge. The lead flight attendant, a tall blonde woman with glacial poise, stood at the aircraft door. "Welcome aboard," she said crisply. Her eyes dropped to his pass, then jumped to his face. "You're in 1A." Lucian nodded again. She offered a strained smile. "Right this way." At seat 1A, Lucian placed his carry-on above and sat down. But something was off. There was no amenity kit at his seat, no welcome drink, no pre-flight menu. Across the aisle, 1B and 1C were already fully set, slippers placed just so, water poured, champagne waiting. He pressed the service button. No one came. 10 minutes passed before a junior attendant stopped by. "Sir, I'm sorry, I think your amenities weren't loaded," she said. "We'll get them to you shortly." He nodded once, but she didn't meet his eyes. The final passengers trickled in. A man in a loud navy checkered blazer dropped into 1C and looked over at Lucian. "You sure you're in the right seat, partner?" he asked with a grin that wasn't friendly. Lucian kept his gaze neutral. "I am." The man chuckled. "Just checking." Then came the drinks cart. Every passenger in Sapphire received champagne, except Lucian. The same junior attendant passed him by, offering sparkling wine to 1B, then 1C, then moved on. Lucian waited. Nothing. When she returned, he raised his hand. No champagne for 1A? She blinked, startled. Oh, I thought you might prefer something else. Orange juice. Lucian's voice was quiet but clear. No. Champagne will be fine. More whispers followed. From 2B, a woman leaned toward her husband. Do you think he upgraded last minute? Lucian answered aloud, not looking their way. No. I booked this seat 6 weeks ago. They froze. The final insult came 15 minutes before takeoff. A different flight attendant walked down the aisle, handing out handwritten welcome notes from the captain to each Sapphire guest. Lucian didn't receive one. When he asked, the attendant frowned. You're Mr. Graves, Lucian said evenly. Lucian Graves. Seat 1. Hey. Sorry, she murmured, walking away quickly. Lucian leaned back, eyes closed, heartbeat slow. It was 1,000 paper cuts, each designed to deny without saying no, each small enough to be dismissed as coincidence. But taken together, they told the truth. They saw him, judged him, and decided he didn't belong. He had walked into a room that demanded wealth, power, and status. He had all three. But none of it mattered, because they didn't expect it to come in his skin. Lucian didn't just feel excluded. He was being erased, politely, quietly, systematically. Moments after takeoff, the captain's voice crackled overhead, offering the usual greetings. Then a pause. And to celebrate one of our loyal flyers, the captain continued, we're hosting a little in-flight trivia game exclusively for our Sapphire passengers. That caught Lucian's attention. It wasn't on the menu, nor announced earlier. Across the cabin, passengers chuckled, drinks lifted, moods lifted. A senior flight attendant emerged holding a small mic and cue cards. She introduced herself as Tanya, her voice honey-slicked, and invited participation with the fake enthusiasm of someone used to scripted interactions. Let's have some fun, she beamed. We'll ask a few questions about airline trivia, reward the winner with a complimentary voucher for their next flight, and of course, a little bragging rights. Heads turned. Passengers perked up. Lucian watched, impassive. Tanya's gaze scanned the cabin theatrically before landing on him. Why don't we start with you, sir? She chirped. Seat 1A. Names? Lucian, he said simply. Tanya smiled a little too widely. Wonderful. Tell us, Lucian, what's the maximum cruising altitude of a Skynova A350 aircraft? Before Lucian could speak, someone snorted. A balding man in 1D muttered, What is this, aviation school? Lucian, unbothered, answered coolly. 41,000 feet. Tanya nodded, though her eyes glinted with something unspoken. Correct. Smart man. The mic shifted. Another question went to a woman in 2C, then a man in 1E. Laughter rippled. Applause followed. Then Tanya returned to Lucian with a smirk. Final round, she declared. And since our friend in 1A is so knowledgeable, let's test him with something trickier. Her smile thinned. Tell me, Lucian, what's the emergency evacuation protocol for Sapphire class passengers if an electrical fire breaks out mid-cabin? The question dropped like a stone. People turned. Someone near 3A snickered. Lucian blinked once. The air around him turned colder. He stared at Tanya, then said flatly, That depends on whether protocol is followed. Or bent. She tilted her head. Meaning some passengers, he replied, voice cool as ice. Don't get protocols. They get profiles. The laughter stopped. Tanya's smile froze. Her grip on the mic shifted slightly. It's just a game, Mr. Graves. So is this seat, apparently, Lucian said. The mic clicked off. The mood changed. Tanya cleared her throat and awkwardly announced the winner, someone in 2D. As she retreated down the aisle, eyes followed her, then flicked back to Lucian. He didn't look away. He didn't fidget. He sat tall, silent, and perfectly composed. The game was over, but something had shifted. An edge had been crossed. A middle-aged woman across the aisle leaned to her husband and whispered, not softly enough, Why so sensitive? It was just a joke. Her husband nodded, replying, "People like that always make everything about race." Lucian heard. Of course he heard. He always heard. The second act began 15 minutes later when the junior attendant returned with dessert trays. Chocolate mousse, fruit tarts, sorbet. As she approached Lucian's seat, she hesitated. "Oh," she said, voice too light. "We're out of the mousse." Lucian eyed the tray. There were 4 left. "Are those not available?" he asked. She blinked. "Those are reserved for the other side of the cabin." Lucian didn't respond. He looked straight ahead. The attendant lingered, flustered. "I can get you fruit instead." "I didn't ask for fruit," Lucian said. She retreated. Minutes later, the man in 1C, checkered blazer, still smug, leaned across and said with a grin, "Don't take it personally, buddy. You gotta admit, you do stick out in here." Lucian turned slowly. "Stick out?" "Yeah," the man said, chuckling. "Not a lot of guys with your flavor in seat 1A." A few passengers chuckled, nervous but complicit. Lucian smiled then. Not warmly, not kindly, just enough. "You're right," he said. "I do stick out." He leaned in slightly, "but not for the reasons you think." The man's grin faded. The mood soured again. The flight crew avoided his row for the next 20 minutes. When he pressed the call button, no one came. When he flagged someone, they said they'd return, but didn't. A passenger in 2A, sympathetic, leaned over. "This doesn't feel right." Lucian nodded once. "It isn't." Yet Lucian said nothing. He watched. He waited. He let them think he was just another passive man who happened to have money. They had no idea they were being audited by the mind that had built AI to detect bias in systems far more complex than this airline's. As he reopened his tablet, the onboard Wi-Fi portal greeted him with a message. "We're sorry, your account is not eligible for Sapphire tier internet access." He blinked once, amused. Access to the airline's encrypted high-speed connection was a privilege reserved for top-tier members, like him. He'd used it on dozens of flights. He tapped retry. The same error returned. Across the aisle, the man in 1B scrolled freely, watching stock charts load in real time. The woman in 2C was already streaming a documentary. Lucian opened the settings, confirmed his Sapphire status was still tied to the reservation, then tapped the help icon. A generic response popped up. "Please contact a flight attendant for further assistance." So he did. When the junior attendant, Madison, finally approached, Lucian gestured to his screen. "My internet access has been restricted," he said calmly. "Can you confirm my account is properly recognized?" Madison glanced at the screen, confused. "That's strange," she murmured. "You're a Sapphire guest. It should activate automatically." "It hasn't," Lucian replied. "And I'd like to know why." Madison hesitated. "Let me ask IT." 10 minutes later, she returned, accompanied by a senior staffer, Leonard, a thin man with a tight collar and tighter voice. "Mr. Graves," Leonard began, "it appears there was a flag on your account from the system." "A flag," Lucian repeated, tone even. "For what reason?" "It's internal," Leonard said quickly. "Some security protocols triggered it. Probably nothing, maybe a profile mismatch." "Show me," Lucian said. Leonard blinked. "I'm afraid I can't. That's back-end level access." "Then escalate it," Lucian said. "I want a resolution now." Leonard offered a stiff nod and walked away. Lucian stared at the tablet in front of him, then tapped open a local cache of his own diagnostic tool, one he designed for enterprise clients to test AI bias. He inputted the behavior: high-tier user, downgraded internet, system flag. The program simulated the probability of that occurrence across 1,000 randomized users. The result? Less than 0.03% chance. He ran it again. Same result. The pattern was statistically impossible unless someone or something had manipulated the system. While Lucian was verifying digital bias, another notification appeared. This one from the airline's mobile app. It read, "Survey. Help us improve your experience. Please rate your satisfaction so far." A smile ghosted across Lucian's face. The timing was almost poetic. He tapped begin. The first question asked him to confirm his seat. When he selected 1A, the next prompt displayed a message. Based on current metrics, you do not qualify for targeted feedback. He blinked. What did that even mean? He exited the survey, opened the app's admin shell, something few passengers knew even existed, and dug into the logs. Lucian, after all, had helped design UI testing software for aviation apps. He scrolled through lines of code until he saw it. Black. His fingers froze. That wasn't algorithmic error. That was human-coded. Behind him, he heard Leonard speaking with another attendant near the galley. He's getting suspicious, Leonard whispered. Well, what do you expect? The other voice hissed. They probably slipped him into Sapphire by mistake. Can't let him think he's entitled to the same perks. Lucian remained still, expression blank, but the words embedded themselves like shrapnel. Slipped in by mistake. That was the phrase. That was the root. Returning to his diagnostics, Lucian activated a stealth recorder on his watch, logging the conversation. He then opened a secure messaging app and typed, "Live test complete. System-wide manipulation confirmed. Audit request code A23 blackout. Attach log sample." He pressed send. The recipient was a server cluster managed by his internal AI ethics division. The file would begin a chain of action no one on this flight could stop. At that moment, a new error message flashed on his tablet. Your device has been temporarily disconnected for security review. Lucian chuckled, not from amusement, but from clarity. They were actively trying to suppress access. But they didn't know the person they were suppressing had written the rules they were trying to bend. Meanwhile, Madison returned, now clearly uneasy. "Mr. Graves," she said quietly, "Leonard said your account was manually reset due to unusual routing history." Lucian looked up. "Routing history? Something about your previous flights not matching your declared tier." "Declared by who?" Lucian asked. Madison's eyes faltered. "The system, I guess." Lucian leaned forward. "The system doesn't guess, Madison. People program systems." A new announcement echoed through the cabin speakers. Tanya, the lead flight attendant who had previously used the trivia game to humiliate him, spoke with the crisp confidence of someone performing on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for choosing Skynova's Sapphire class. We'd like to take a moment to recognize one of our passengers today with the Skynova Loyalty Distinction Award, a small gesture to thank our most elite flyers for their continued support." Heads turned. Several passengers straightened in their seats, obviously hoping to hear their name. Lucian remained still, though he already suspected what was coming. This month's recipient, Tanya continued with deliberate cheer, is Mr. Elliot Crane, seated in 2A, who has flown over 120,000 miles with us this year. A round of polite claps followed. A few whoops, one uncomfortably close to a cheer. Lucian glanced back at 2A. Elliot, a white man in a rumpled suit jacket and open collar, stood awkwardly, gave a sheepish nod, and accepted a small gift bag handed over by Tanya. It was neatly wrapped, sealed with the airline's gold insignia. A few cameras snapped photos. "Congratulations again, Mr. Crane," Tanya finished. "We're honored to have you." Lucian blinked once. According to his own Skynova portal, before they had locked him out, he had logged 168,000 miles in the same time frame. He hadn't just outflown Elliot. He had outflown nearly everyone in the cabin. Yet no one had acknowledged that. Not even a mention. Not even a glance. Because this wasn't about data. It was about optics. And Lucian didn't fit theirs. As Tanya walked past him, he spoke just loud enough for only her to hear. "How many miles did I log this year?" She paused, didn't look down at him. "I wouldn't know, sir." "You do," Lucian replied quietly, "because I saw it in the portal before you locked me out. 168,000. That's 40% more than your winner." Tanya's jaw tensed slightly. "I'm just following the event list, Mr. Graves." "Of course you are," Lucian said. "And who made that list?" "That would be corporate," she answered after a pause. Lucian stared at her, voice calm but heavy. "No, that would be culture." Tanya walked away. Elliot Crane, still holding his award bag, now stared at it like it had suddenly gained weight. A few passengers whispered again. The tension that had started as whispers was becoming something denser, thicker. Performative civility had given way to a spreading discomfort. They could all feel the imbalance now. They might not admit it aloud, but the moment was undeniable. Later, as the flight continued, Lucian opened the Airline app on his second, encrypted tablet, one they hadn't blocked because they didn't know it existed. Using backdoor credentials he still retained from a consulting engagement 3 years earlier, he logged into the event management dashboard used for in-flight experiences. In the list of loyalty award candidates, his name had been first, highlighted, flagged as priority, confirmed. But next to it, someone had left a comment in the notes field. Not the right image. Choose someone else. The message had no signature, just a timestamp. He took a screenshot, encrypted it, and added it to his expanding file. At the same moment, a young male flight attendant passed by and discreetly dropped something onto his tray table, a folded paper napkin. Lucian looked down. Written in pen, barely legible. We see it too. This isn't right. No name, no seat number, just the quiet acknowledgement from someone inside the system. Lucian folded the note, slid it into his coat pocket, and exhaled slowly. For years, people had told him racism today was subtle. No more hoses or slurs, just algorithms and preferences. But what he saw today was as loud as a siren, as sharp as a blade, and carried out with the approval of a crew trained to look the other way. By the time the dinner carts rolled out, the energy in the cabin had shifted. Some passengers now avoided eye contact with him entirely, their earlier smugness replaced with silent embarrassment. Others, especially those seated farther back, kept glancing forward, as if trying to understand the invisible battle unfolding in first class. One man, a corporate consultant Lucian recognized from previous flights, stood, walked over during a lull, and leaned toward him. "For what it's worth," he murmured, "you should have gotten that award. I've seen your name on the loyalty board in the lounge more times than I can count." Lucian looked up, not smiling. "Then maybe you should have said something when they handed it to someone else." The man's eyes faltered. "Yeah, maybe I should have." He was preparing to log off when his tablet suddenly went dark. A pop-up appeared before the screen faded to black. "This device is no longer authorized on this network." That made him pause. The secondary device had been encrypted, not connected to the airline's main portal. There was no legitimate reason for it to be forcibly disconnected, unless someone was actively targeting him. He looked up, his expression unchanged, but his pulse sharpened. Seconds later, Madison, the younger attendant, returned to his row. Her hands fidgeted with a service cloth she didn't need. "Mr. Graves," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just got a notice from the purser. There's an issue with your seat assignment." Lucian didn't blink. "An issue?" She nodded hesitantly. "Apparently, your seat has been reassigned." Lucian raised an eyebrow, not in confusion, but in confirmation. "To where?" "They've moved you to 14D, in economy." For a moment, there was only silence between them, not the awkward social kind, but the sharpened pause of a man deciding whether to burn the room down or let the match wait. "On what basis?" he asked. "The system flagged your profile as high risk," Madison said, her voice tight. "Something about non-compliant behavior, security triggers, and unauthorized digital access." Lucian leaned back, his voice calm. "So now I'm not just an unqualified loyalty member. I'm a risk." Madison looked away. "They told me to deliver the message. They're sending someone to escort you to your new seat." The words hadn't even settled in the air when Leonard appeared, flanked by a second uniformed staffer with the artificial friendliness of someone obeying protocol while ignoring morality. "Mr. Graves," Leonard said, "for the comfort of all passengers, we need you to cooperate." "Define comfort," Lucian replied, still seated. Leonard's eyes flicked to the uniformed assistant. "Sir, failure to comply may result in removal at the next airport." Lucian didn't move. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, not the secondary tablet, not the encrypted device, just his primary smartphone, and pressed record. "I'd like to confirm," he said, staring directly at Leonard. that you are downgrading me mid-flight from my paid Sapphire 1A seat to economy based on unverifiable internal metrics and manipulated system triggers." Leonard's face stiffened. "This isn't personal, sir." "It never is," Lucian said, then stood. As he stepped into the aisle, silence radiated outward like a ripple in still water. Passengers looked up from their meals and screens, expressions shifting from casual curiosity to growing discomfort. Everyone had noticed. A few began recording. One woman murmured, "What did he do?" Another whispered, "They're moving him out of first class." Lucian didn't answer them. He moved down the aisle, past leather recliners and champagne flutes, toward the tight rows of coach, where comfort was measured in inches and silence came from resignation. When he arrived at seat 14D, a middle seat crammed between a couple arguing over window shades, he paused. The flight attendant from economy, an older woman with a hardened face, blinked when she saw him. "You're in 14D?" she asked. "You're from first class?" "Apparently not anymore," Lucian replied. She stepped aside. No apology, no explanation, just a shrug and a seatbelt. He reconnected his phone to the general cabin Wi-Fi, which hadn't been blocked yet, and accessed a secure app interface built into his corporate cloud. He tapped a red icon marked Compliance Event. A dialog opened. "Deploy Observer Protocol?" He typed one word, "Yes." 10 seconds later, his internal network AI began scanning the flight manifest, cross-referencing passenger IDs, pulling metadata on previous flag flights, and building a report in real time. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was war. Back in first class, Madison approached Leonard, visibly shaken. "He didn't resist," she whispered. Leonard nodded. He wouldn't dare. People like that make noise, but never act. Madison bit her lip. "But what if he files a complaint?" Leonard scoffed. "Then he'll wait 6 months for an apology email and a $50 voucher. That's how it works." What Leonard didn't know was that his voice had just been captured on 3 separate devices: Lucian's phone, a sympathetic passenger's hidden camera, and the flight deck recorder, which had been activated manually by the assistant pilot who'd overheard the commotion through the internal channel. Too many eyes were watching now, and someone else was listening too. 2 rows behind Lucian, a woman in glasses tapped her phone rapidly, switching between screens. Her badge, half hidden beneath her blazer, read FAA Compliance Auditor, Internal Audit Division. She had boarded under an alias. She had witnessed everything. And now, she was documenting the moment Skynova Airlines crossed the line from procedural error into systemic abuse. Now his elbows were pressed against 2 strangers, one of whom had already made an offhand comment under her breath when he arrived. Didn't think they let first-class folks fall this far. The man on his left hadn't said a word, but Lucian could feel the judgment vibrating off him like static. And yet, Lucian remained silent, unmoved, not because he was defeated, but because he was calculating. His network scanner continued to run in the background, quietly collecting logs, manifest data, and cabin audio. His digital eyes now stretched across the aircraft, documenting every whisper, every lie, every falsified protocol hidden under bureaucracy. Then a ping. A notification lit up his phone's secure channel. The message was short. Code discrepancy detected. VIP guest count mismatch in manifest. 1 unnamed seat registered in Sapphire Galley. Lucian blinked, his thoughts tightening into focus. The Sapphire Galley, restricted. Not visible from the economy section. Not open to regular passengers. Only accessible through a side corridor typically used by staff and high-ranking passengers. And according to a scan, 1 digital badge had been scanned into that section that didn't match any customer ticket. An anomaly. A ghost. Someone was in the VIP behind the VIP area, and their presence was deliberately unlogged. Lucian slowly unbuckled his belt, ignoring the curious glance from the man beside him, and stood. "Where are you going?" the woman asked, her tone more suspicious than concerned. "Stretching my legs," he replied, then stepped into the aisle and walked toward the front, passing row after row of oblivious passengers watching movies, drinking sodas, or scrolling through vacation photos. As he approached the business class divider, a flight attendant blocked his path. This one was older, stern-faced. Her tone clipped. "Sir, I'm afraid you're not allowed past this point." Lucian gave her a polite but firm look. "I need to speak to the flight supervisor." "You've already been reassigned, sir," she replied. "Please return to your seat. Then you can tell the supervisor to come to me," he said, remaining exactly where he was. Seconds later, Leonard arrived, visibly annoyed. "Mr. Graves, I thought we resolved this." "You've resolved nothing," Lucian replied calmly. "You downgraded me under a manufactured flag, refused to provide evidence of that decision, and now you're denying access to a section I have every right to inquire about." "That section," Leonard replied stiffly, "is reserved for classified high-security guests." "Then why is it listed as a crew-only galley in the manifest?" Lucian asked. "Why is there a ghost entry without name or status logged inside it?" Leonard faltered. "That's none of your concern. When I'm forcibly removed from my paid seat, and that exact section contains an undocumented individual who bypassed security logs, it becomes my concern." Passengers in business class had begun to notice the exchange. A man in 5A looked up from his laptop, frowning. A young woman paused her music. Leonard leaned closer, his voice lower. "You're looking to escalate something you don't understand." "You're right," Lucian said softly. "You don't understand who you're dealing with either." He turned on his heel and walked back, not to economy, but to the galley near the mid-cabin, where 2 junior attendants were preparing trays. "Excuse me," he said. "I'd like to speak with whoever is in charge of cabin security." "We're not allowed to," one began, but Lucian raised a single hand. "Don't worry. They'll come." And he tapped his phone again. Within 60 seconds, a coded request was triggered to the FAA internal channel. The observer, the woman in glasses 2 rows behind him, received it and stood. Quietly, calmly, she flashed her badge to the nearest crew member. "Auditor Jackson, step aside." And just like that, the chain of power snapped. She walked past Leonard without acknowledging him, past Tanya, still smiling for business class, and toward the front, directly to the sapphire galley door. She knocked once, then swiped her badge. The door opened. What she saw inside made her pause. Inside sat a man in a dark gray suit with no airline insignia, no luggage, no boarding pass on file. A black briefcase sat next to him. A tablet on the table displayed live encryption mapping for international traffic patterns. This wasn't a passenger. This was an operation. And Lucian had caught it by being removed. Back in economy, Lucian waited. He didn't need to see inside the galley to know what they had found. He didn't need to speak to the observer to know she would file a report. He had already won something more powerful than a confrontation. He had turned their exclusion into exposure. Lucian Graves remained standing near the service galley in the midsection, his hands relaxed at his sides, but his mind was already 30 moves ahead. He had baited their system, forced their responses, triggered internal scrutiny. And now, finally, the veil was cracking. Leonard's absence from the aisle after the auditor's intervention said more than any denial ever could. He had been removed, or at the very least, silenced. Tanya hadn't returned to the first-class service lane either. Lucian watched as junior crew members scrambled to fill roles they didn't normally lead, their eyes avoiding contact with him, their movements increasingly rushed and uncertain. That was the first sign. Fear from those who were never trained to explain anything. Lucian stepped calmly toward the front, passing economy rows, nodding politely to the observer, Agent Jackson, who now stood by the cockpit door, conversing with the co-pilot. She offered him a subtle glance, then looked down at her tablet. That's when the real shift happened. The captain's voice, steady and seasoned, came over the intercom, not with a flight update, but with a strange announcement. "We'd like to thank all our passengers for their continued patience. Due to a sudden adjustment in airspace clearance, we've received a direct order from Skynova headquarters. We are currently rerouting slightly and will provide an update shortly." The captain's tone was too controlled, too rehearsed. Lucian recognized it instantly. PR training in action. Something had reached corporate. Someone was panicking. As he stood in the aisle near row 1C, where only an hour ago he had been the object of quiet humiliation, Lucian took a breath, pulled his phone from his pocket, and sent a single push notification to his private assistant. Code Silvergate initiated. Brief board. Schedule video. Prepare release. It was time. Exactly 3 minutes later, Tanya reappeared. Her face looked different now, not smug, not confident, but pale and composed in a way that betrayed the pressure she was under. "Mr. Graves," she said softly, "we apologize for the misunderstanding earlier. If you'd be willing to return to your original seat, we've made arrangements to—" "No," Lucian said plainly, his voice low but resolute. "You didn't remove me by mistake. You removed me by design. I won't sit back down simply because someone higher up realized who I am." Tanya hesitated, struggling to hold his gaze. "I was just asked to relay orders." "I know. That's all anyone here does. But let me ask you something." He stepped slightly closer, never raising his voice. "At what point did you believe I didn't belong? When you saw my face? Or when your system conveniently failed every standard process in my case?" Lucian turned, facing the business class cabin that had half-watched the earlier drama with smug detachment. "My name," he said clearly, "is Lucian Alaric Graves. I am the founder and CEO of Telion Dynamics, one of Skynova's lead technology vendors. The biometric software your systems use to predict passenger behavior, we built it. The customer analytics dashboard used to determine loyalty tiers, we licensed it. And the AI framework you embedded in your risk profile modeling 2 quarters ago, it came from my desk." Row after row of passengers stared, some blinking, others shifting uncomfortably, a few gasping outright. The woman who had previously whispered that people like that always make it about race turned beet red and stared at her tray. The man who had laughed about Lucian falling to economy now stared wide-eyed at the phone in his hand, clearly searching for proof of what he had just heard. Lucian didn't gloat. He didn't even smile. "I didn't say anything earlier," he continued, "because I wanted to observe. And now I've seen enough." From the cockpit, Agent Jackson stepped forward, standing beside him. "Mr. Graves," she said in full voice, "we've confirmed an unauthorized manifest override and a violation of FAA Trust Zone Protocol. The individual housed in the Sapphire Galley has been identified as a private contractor with no legal clearance to occupy a classified seat. We're rerouting to an allied hub for full investigation." Lucian nodded once. "Thank you." Tanya took a step back. I didn't know who you were." "That's the problem," Lucian said. "You shouldn't have had to." At that moment, the onboard screens lit up with a system-wide message. Public statement from Skynova HQ scheduled for broadcast at landing. Immediate debrief requested with Graves/Telion team. In the background, murmurs became louder, confused, shocked, and in some cases shameful. First class no longer held its usual untouchable silence. People were talking. People were wondering. Lucian finally walked forward, not to reclaim seat 1A, but to sit in the open jump seat near the galley. It wasn't about comfort now. It was about optics. The moment Lucian Graves spoke his name aloud and revealed his role at the helm of Telion Dynamics, the ecosystem aboard Flight 392 shifted in a way that even turbulence couldn't replicate. His declaration hadn't just stunned passengers. It had fractured the carefully managed facade Skynova Airlines had built around luxury, order, and exclusivity. But Lucian knew the game wasn't won with one revelation. A single truth, no matter how sharp, was never enough to bring down a system constructed on years of subtle exclusion. That's why, as he sat on the jump seat near the Sapphire Galley, arms folded, gaze steady, he tapped once more into his secure uplink and initiated the next phase, distribution. Within seconds, the encrypted folder he'd built throughout the flight began uploading across multiple secure nodes, internal ethics boards, legal holding accounts, and most notably, Telion's PR division, which had been placed on standby the moment he'd sent the earlier Silvergate directive. Across the country, at a glass-paneled tower in downtown Chicago, a senior media manager picked up her phone, read the single-line instruction, "Go," and press publish. A short-form video, 2 minutes and 36 seconds in length, hit every major platform at once. It showed the downgrade, the fabricated system errors, the manipulated loyalty metrics, the moment Leonard referred to Lucian as a troublemaker with the wrong image, and most damning of all, a crystal-clear audio clip of Tanya whispering to a colleague, "He doesn't fit the brand." By the time the flight was still cruising at 37,000 feet, the video had reached 1.2 million views. Within 20 more minutes, it would hit 5. Major public figures had begun sharing it: CEOs, athletes, journalists. The trending tag, #Graves in the Sky, exploded across platforms. Comments poured in. "This is why we need representation in tech. He built their system, and they used it against him. They kicked out the architect because of his skin." Back on board, Tanya received the first ripple of backlash through her in-ear comm. The director of in-flight operations was on the line. Her face went pale, her voice dropped to a whisper, but Lucian still heard it. "Yes, sir. No, I had no idea he was recording. Yes, I understand. I'm so sorry." She turned and stared at Lucian, but he didn't return the gaze. She no longer mattered. She had become a symbol of something much larger, a system cracking from within. Elsewhere on the aircraft, another shift occurred. The young man in 17C, quiet until now, with earbuds in and hoodie pulled low, stood up and walked toward Lucian. In his hand was a phone with a paused video, the very clip that had just gone viral. "Sir," the young man said quietly, "I recorded everything that happened when they pulled you out of 1A. From the seat reassignment to the looks they gave you. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it, but now I think it matters." Lucian glanced at the screen. The angle was clear. The audio was flawless. He nodded once. "Send it." The young man did. Then returned to his seat, head high. Moments later, the intercom chimed again. This time, it wasn't the captain or a flight attendant. It was a corporate override. The unmistakable voice of Skynova's Vice President of Customer Relations, patched in live. "To all passengers aboard Flight 392, we wish to address a matter that has recently come to our attention involving one of our guests. We are aware of the situation involving Mr. Lucian Graves. We extend our sincerest apologies for the treatment he has received aboard this flight. Effective immediately, a full internal investigation has been launched. The staff involved will be relieved of duty upon landing. Thank you for your patience and cooperation." Passengers stared at each other, wide-eyed. A man in 1C shifted uncomfortably, clearly trying to remember if he had laughed earlier. A woman in 2B murmured, "I think that was the CEO talking." Another passenger checked the trending tab on her phone and let out an audible gasp. "He has 20% ownership in the airline. Oh my God." Meanwhile, back at Skynova headquarters, things moved even faster. Richard Caldwell, the airline CEO, sat in a glass conference room surrounded by frantic executives and flashing news alerts. A paused screenshot of Lucian's face sat frozen on a large display monitor, just above a scrolling feed of real-time social media backlash. The PR director turned to him, voice tight with panic. "We've lost control of the narrative. Stocks down 6% and falling. We need a direct statement from the board, preferably with Graves at the table." Caldwell clenched his jaw. "Get him on the line. Apologize. Offer the board seat if we have to." "He already owns more than enough to demand one," someone else muttered. "This is bigger than a seat. He can take the company public or burn it down." Caldwell stood up. "Then let's pray he wants the former." Back in the sky, Lucian's phone buzzed. It was a private number. He answered without hesitation. "Graves," he said. The voice on the other end was calm but strained. "Mr. Graves, this is Caldwell. On behalf of Skynova, I want to formally apologize and..." Lucian cut him off. "You're not talking to a victim. You're talking to your largest strategic threat. I'll deal with you once I land. Until then, prepare your board." As Flight 392 began its descent into the rerouted landing hub, a secured FAA-coordinated terminal outside Chicago, Lucian Graves remained composed in the forward jump seat, his phone resting screen down on his lap, its LED blinking silently with constant updates. Across the aircraft, Passengers murmured in low tones, no longer discussing their dinner plans or business meetings, but instead whispering about the man who had exposed the invisible architecture of systemic bias, live, 30,000 feet in the air. Behind Lucian, Agent Jackson stood near the cockpit, issuing final protocols to ground control and security personnel awaiting the plane's arrival. The galley staff no longer moved with a brisk confidence of trained luxury service agents. Instead, they fumbled quietly, unsure whether to serve, stand still, or simply disappear. Tanya sat stiffly in her fold-down seat by the emergency exit, her face pale, her shoulders rigid. Leonard was nowhere in sight. The wheels touched down with a muted roar, and the aircraft taxied to a cordoned-off jet bridge surrounded by 2 security vehicles and 3 black SUVs, one belonging to the FAA, one to Teleon Dynamics, and the third unmarked, but carrying Skynova executives who had rushed in from the nearby headquarters. As the cabin doors opened, Lucian remained seated while a flight supervisor entered. He didn't make eye contact with the crew. He addressed the passengers first. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to ongoing investigations related to operational discrepancies on this flight, we ask that you remain seated while we initiate a tiered deplaning process. Thank you for your cooperation." Tanya glanced at Lucian, then at the uniformed officials now boarding. A man in a gray blazer approached her, holding a tablet. "Tanya Wilkes." She nodded faintly. "Please come with us. You are being relieved of duty pending disciplinary review and regulatory investigation. This is not optional." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her voice barely registered. "I was following protocol." "That's exactly the problem," the man replied. 2 other attendants, those who had participated in the trivia stunt and meal exclusions, were escorted next, followed by Leonard, who emerged from the lavatory looking disheveled and defeated. As he passed Lucian, he mumbled something that sounded like wasn't personal. But Lucian didn't even flinch. Apologies meant nothing when spoken from sinking ships. Outside, a crowd of press had already gathered behind barricades. Live cameras waited. The news had broken fully now, not just that Skynova Airlines had ejected its own AI vendor mid-flight, but that its algorithm had been coded by human hands, with exclusionary logic. Several journalists were already calling it the most sophisticated act of digital profiling ever caught in real time. Within the Skynova executive suite, a full board meeting had been summoned. Richard Caldwell, the airline CEO, stood at the head of a long oval table, his voice taut with urgency as he addressed his directors. "The damage is beyond PR. Teleon owns 21% of our Class A voting stock, and under revised shareholder protections, Mr. Graves can force an executive review without warning. If we don't act decisively, this company becomes a pariah overnight." The director of compliance interrupted. "It's already happening. We've lost 4 partnership renewals this morning. Social media sentiment analysis is down 79%. Employee morale is tanking. Recruitment calls are going unanswered. And the unions just requested a formal review of discrimination policies across all branches." Caldwell turned to the head of HR. "Has the internal terminations package been prepared?" "Yes," she nodded. "Effective immediately, we've terminated 6 in-flight staff involved in the incident, including Tanya Wilkes and Leonard Shaw. We've also suspended 5 back-end engineers connected to the algorithm customization that flagged Mr. Graves' account." Caldwell hesitated. "What about the general counsel?" The room went silent. Someone finally spoke. "She signed off on the profile framework last quarter. She's complicit." Caldwell exhaled through his teeth. "Then she goes too." Back on the tarmac, Lucian walked calmly through the private security lane flanked by Teleon legal advisors and Agent Jackson. A junior Skynova representative tried to intercept him, clipboard in hand, desperate to convey goodwill. "Mr. Graves, the board is requesting an immediate closed-door dialogue. They're prepared to issue a full apology, executive resignations, and equity restructuring to address the incident." Lucian paused only long enough to meet the young man's eyes. "They're not prepared. They're afraid." The representative stammered. We just want to start correcting this." You can't correct what you haven't acknowledged, Lucian said. And, until then, we're not in a conversation. You're in a crisis. I'm in control. Inside the adjacent boardroom, the assembled executives waited in stiff suits and tighter expressions. When Lucian entered, the room stood. He didn't ask them to sit. You've built your brand on the illusion of premium inclusion, he said, voice level. But what you've sold is exclusion dressed as preference. What happened to me today happens to people without platforms, without power every single day. And you've built your profit margins on their silence. Caldwell cleared his throat. Mr. Graves, let me begin by saying, you'll begin by listening, Lucian interrupted. There will be no statements, no offers, no committees. There will be restructuring. There will be oversight. There will be reparations. And there will be consequences. 3 weeks after Lucian Graves walked out of the Skynova boardroom, having issued the most uncompromising terms the airline had ever heard, the industry was still recovering from the aftershocks. Headlines continued to swirl, but now they were less about the scandal and more about the transformation it had triggered. Skynova Airlines, once the darling of luxury air travel, had entered what the press called its redemption phase, a complete restructuring of policy, personnel, and technology, all monitored under Lucian's direct supervision. From his office at Teleon Dynamics Chicago headquarters, Lucian reviewed the third-stage compliance dashboard projected on the wall-to-wall screen before him. Beside him sat Agent Jackson, now officially embedded as a federal observer within Skynova's restructuring team. And across the table were the new interim Skynova leadership staff, diverse, carefully vetted, and no longer willing to hide behind vague policies or diluted PR statements. For the demands Lucian had made and the board had agreed to under pressure, every employee at Skynova, starting with executive leadership and trickling down to entry-level ground crew, was now undergoing mandatory bias impact immersion training developed by Teleon's ethical AI team. The program, called Human First, used neural response mapping, empathy-based simulation modules, and behavior correction diagnostics to track measurable internal change. It wasn't just a slideshow about racism. It was a digital mirror that showed employees what it felt like to be profiled, humiliated, and dehumanized in real time. Resistance had been high at first, particularly from long-term staff who had grown comfortable operating within unspoken hierarchies. But Lucian hadn't designed the program to make them comfortable. He designed it to make them honest. And slowly, across departments, honesty began to take root. Meanwhile, the original crew from Flight 392 had disappeared from the skies. Tanya Wilkes, once the confident lead attendant, was now enrolled in the pilot wave of Teleon's Redemption Initiative, a separate program designed not for punishment, but for accountability. Through weekly modules, Tanya and others like her were required to relive their decisions on that flight through digital reconstructions, observe their own biases play out, and engage in restorative dialogue with facilitators and behavioral psychologists. Initially, she resisted, claiming she'd simply followed orders. But when shown her own words, "He doesn't fit the brand," looped on screen in front of a room of trainees, something cracked. She cried. She apologized. Not to Lucian, he didn't need it, but to the idea of the people she had hurt without even remembering their names. Leonard Shaw, the flight supervisor who had executed the seating downgrade with robotic certainty, had fared worse. Fired and unable to secure work in the aviation field, he eventually applied for a ground logistics role in a regional carrier. On his application, under the reason for leaving previous employer field, he had written, "Exposed by the man I underestimated." He never got a call back. Skynova itself, however, had changed. Their new brand campaign, "Everyone Deserves a Sky," ran not on sleek commercials with model passengers, but on documentary-style videos featuring real customers sharing stories of when they weren't believed, heard, or seen. More importantly, Lucian ensured that changes ran deeper than optics. Teleon embedded a real-time bias monitoring system into Skynova's operations, one that triggered internal audits the moment a complaint surfaced, cross-referencing it against biometric trends, employee history, and recorded data. This wasn't PR. This was systemic correction. On a cool October morning, Skynova's CEO, now a newly appointed Latina executive who once led an airline equity coalition, invited Lucian to join the airline's advisory board. He declined the seat, instead nominating a rotating community representative from a passenger's equity council. "I don't need to sit in your boardroom," he told her. "I need to make sure no one ever has to sit where I did on that flight." Months later, during a public ethics forum hosted in D.C., Lucian stood before a crowd of industry leaders, regulators, and policymakers. "Justice," he said into the microphone, "is not the punishment of a few visible villains. It's the dismantling of invisible systems that allow villainy to feel like protocol. You don't fix that by firing people. You fix it by rewriting the rules, repurposing the tools, and requiring that decency be as measurable as profit." The room gave him a standing ovation. But for Lucian, the applause wasn't the point. On the ground, people were boarding flights without fear of being seen as less. A middle-aged black schoolteacher in Houston flew Sapphire class and was greeted by name. A hijabi woman in Seattle asked to change seats and wasn't questioned twice. A single father in Newark got upgraded after a delay, and no one blinked when he walked into 1A with a brown-skinned toddler in his arms. The world hadn't changed overnight. But now, thanks to Lucian Graves, it was finally trying. The end. If this story moved you, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another powerful narrative like this one. What part of Lucian's journey hit you the hardest? Was there a moment that truly shocked or inspired you? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your perspective.